All right, we're diving into a really fascinating chapter from the book of Numbers. Now, this isn't just some dry list of ancient rules. Think of it more like a blueprint, a guide for how to build a nation from the ground up, given to a people who are right on the edge of a massive change.
So, this is the big question that's really behind everything we're about to explore. You have the Israelites, right? They've been wandering in the wilderness, and now they're getting ready to finally settle down, to plant roots, to become a nation. But to do that, you need a framework. You need a shared understanding of things like gratitude, justice, and who you are as a people. These laws we're looking at are the building blocks for that very foundation.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the rules for offerings, basically how to say thank you. Then we'll get into what happens when people mess up and how the law made a huge distinction between honest mistakes and outright rebellion. We've got a dramatic, real-life example of that, and then we'll wrap up with a fascinating, super practical tool they were given to help remember all of this. Okay, so let's jump in with the offerings. The idea was, once the Israelites were in their new home, they needed a standardized way to express their gratitude to God. This could be for a festival, to fulfill a vow, or even just as a spontaneous gift. And the text describes these offerings as creating a pleasing aroma to the Lord. Now, what's really cool here is that an offering wasn't just about the animal. It was a complete package. A whole meal, really. You had your main sacrifice, sure, but it always came with flour, olive oil, and wine. And check this out. Notice how the amounts scale up. A little lamb gets a smaller portion of grain and wine, but a big bull, that required a much larger offering to go with it. It was all proportional. And this is huge. Woven right into these laws is this core principle of equality. These rules weren't just for native-born Israelites. They applied just the same to any foreigner who was living among them. This established one single standard of law for the entire community, no exceptions.
And it wasn't only about animal sacrifices. Another really important act of gratitude was this, offering a portion from the very first bit of your harvest. It was a tangible, physical way to remember and acknowledge that the land itself and everything it produced was a gift.
Okay, so you have rules for showing gratitude, but what about when things go wrong? I mean, what happens when people inevitably mess up? This is where the law gets really sophisticated, because it creates a system that makes a critical distinction based entirely on a person's intent. And this right here is the absolute core of their legal thinking on this. The law draws a bright, clear line between an unintentional sin, a mistake, something done without realizing it, and a defiant sin. A defiant sin isn't just breaking a rule. The text describes it as actively despising God's word. It's an act of rebellion. And as you can imagine, the consequences for these two things could not be more different. So, if you messed up by accident, there was a clear path to make things right. It didn't matter if it was the whole community that made a mistake or just one person. You brought a specific sacrifice, the priest made atonement, and the text is very explicit. You will be forgiven. It's a system built on restoration, not just punishment.
But for that defiant sin, there was no sacrifice, there was no path back. The consequence was to be cut off, a really severe punishment that probably meant exile or even death. And the text says their guilt remains on them. It's this stark finality that sets the stage for the shocking real-world example that comes next.
And that brings us to this case study. This isn't a hypothetical legal problem. It's a raw, intense story of how this principle of defiant sin was applied in a real situation. And frankly, the outcome is pretty shocking.
The facts of the case are laid out very simply. The people are in the wilderness, the command to rest on the Sabbath day is well known and foundational, and this man is found out in the open gathering wood, which is a clear violation of that command. But here's what's so fascinating. Their first reaction wasn't immediate judgment. The leaders actually didn't know what the specific punishment should be, so they put the man in custody while they figured it out. It just goes to show you they were working through how to apply these laws in real time, just like any new legal system.
And then the verdict comes, directly from God to Moses. The man must die. His act wasn't seen as an accidental slip-up. Because it was so public and so blatant, it was judged as an act of defiance, of despising the Lord's word. The punishment was severe, and it was communal, meant to send a powerful message to everyone else.
So after laying out all these incredibly high-stakes laws, the chapter ends with something that is just amazingly practical. You have to be wondering, how could anyone possibly remember all of this and avoid such terrible consequences? Well, the solution was a constant, wearable visual reminder.
The instruction was to put tassels, each with a special blue cord, on the corners of their clothing. Now, this was not a fashion statement. It was a cognitive tool. Its entire purpose was to be an external cue for an internal commitment, to literally catch your eye and stop you from just following whatever impulse or desire you might have in the moment.
And the way it worked was a brilliant, simple 5-step process that starts with your eyes. You look at the tassel. That triggers you to remember the commands. Remembering prompts you to obey them. This helps you avoid temptation, and the result is that you live a life that is consecrated, set apart for God. It's a whole chain reaction from a single glance.
And ultimately, these tassels were about more than just a personal memory aid. They were a direct link to their national story, to their very identity. The chapter ends by saying, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt." So this little blue cord ties obedience directly to who they were, a people who had been rescued.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. From a legal system that's based on intent, to a dramatic story of rebellion, to a simple cord of blue, all of this was about shaping a culture and an identity. And it makes you wonder, what are the blue cords in our own lives? What are those intentional, visible reminders we use today to help us remember our commitments and actually live by our deepest values?